access a diagnosis to access services. What it should be around is the needs of that individual. And the idea of that is two people, for example, with autism will have very different needs, and it's about not labelling people based on their diagnosis, but actually looking at their needs to be able to access those services. And very much at a national level and a local level, that is the kind of ethos, is that people are accessing services based on needs, not on their diagnosis. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that there are some services that will have a diagnosis to access them, and that's because of, for example, the specialists that work in that service. But in general, the area would be to say it's based on the individual needs and actually look at more of a person-centred approach rather than just looking at a list of labels and diagnoses to access the support.
And my view, this is just personal view, but my view is that that comes out of a context of squeezed things as well, because if there was everything you ever needed, diagnosis would be less of a focus. Having said that, I think for families, there's a lot of people who have autism and diagnosis of autism, and families who very much want to understand a diagnosis in order for themselves to be able to relate to it and relate to one another, and I think that's absolutely fine. The bit that becomes a bit of a shame is where that diagnosis is required to get a service, and that service is required to have a happy life, and that's where we as a society are letting people down, because we've made it so that, you know, benefits are attached to a diagnosis. It's a deficit model, you know, and we're really, really keen to not kind of feed into that idea, because we see people having many, many strengths, and what we'd like to do is be able to do it needs-based, acknowledging people's assets and strengths as well as the bits that need support. I think in some ways social care have done that in are better at that in some ways, because I guess it's not got a medical focus, but they under the Care Act are required to assess somebody with autism, and they'll be looking at it in terms of the needs of a person. If that's done thoroughly and well, there is no reason for that diagnosis to make a difference to the care that is then provided. Unfortunately, people have felt that they've had to what is happening is that it's Care Act eligible if you have a diagnosis. So if you don't have a diagnosis but you have all the same issues that are restricting you from getting on with your life and making relationships, then you might find that it's difficult to get yourself a social care needs assessment. And it's the same with everything, I guess. So if we were able to do that well and acknowledge people's vulnerabilities and base a plan around need, diagnosis would be less important.